G'day everyone and welcome to another Automatons test. Today I want to show you all the problems I came across when upgrading from the remote block to the new AI blocks with the Automatons update. I want to show you all the things I came across, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything in between, so make sure you stick around to the very end. While you're there, check out the description below, which will have a link to the Steam Workshop or Mod.io with the link of this download and world save that you see right here. With that being said, let's get stuck into it. Alright, let's start off with something a little easy first before getting onto something a little more difficult like that mine collector drone. This patrol drone just uses two blocks, the AI flight move block, which you need to have no matter what sort of design you're going after. This allows the collision avoidance, precision mode, the speed, the minimum altitude above the surface of the planet, and these two values here that start at 45 degrees each when you first build this block. If you are on a planet and your drone does not have enough thrusters when the drone or missile is upside down, does not have enough thrusters to cancel out the gravity, make sure this value is on. Also, having these two values at 0 will allow the drone to dock to this connector exactly where it is right now, without nosing down, nosing up, or even tilting left and right. That's what those two values right here are for. Now, with that being said, this also uses a combination of that flight and the recorder block, which uses waypoints. Very similar to the remote block's GPS system and GPS locations that you place with the drone or your player itself, but it uses the waypoints. One downside, you can only have one trigger compared to the remote block, which has 9 or 10 that you can place throughout in that. So you have to have one timer block to actually trigger it and change onto another AI recorder, AI basic, or another remote block entirely with a different AI system. You have to turn the old one off and the new one on, as well as turn the AI behaviors off and on retrospectively. Hopefully that all makes sense, and that kind of made sense in my head. Moving down to the bit down the bottom, you can either place the waypoints manually yourself, or you can actually hit this record button and record each interval. I'd probably go with every, say, 5 seconds. Just by hitting the control and left click, you can get that value there for something a bit more defined. And the minimal distance is perfect at 1. I have not really tested much with this, as I'd much rather place the waypoints manually myself. Another downside is this has no remote block on it whatsoever. I can't control it to actually place those waypoints. So the game forces me to not only have more than one remote block that would do the same sort of task, it would then require the AI recorder, the AI flight, as well as any timer block retrospective to then change over to a different AI block, and so and so. This also means I have to have a control seat on it to then fly this drone, as you see in the G menu down here, to then add those waypoints to the correct recorder block. So with all that being said, let's just trigger this up, and it just uses the same sort of GPS waypoint system, goes around the solar panels and just comes back to the connector and docks back up. Very same thing with these two mine field drones, and I'll just trigger them up retrospectively, nice and easy so I can see them in the background. They'll just trigger up behind that printer, which won't be in the final save. That is a very precious design of mine, and I don't think I'll be releasing it ever. Don't know, comment down below what you think of that. Getting onto something a little bit more complex, and this one actually uses two actual recorder blocks for the fact that it needs to go to your drilling platform, and because you can't have any more than one trigger, it has to trigger a timer block to do the set instructions you want it to do. So when it gets to the loading platform, which is the one just over there, it will then trigger up that load timer to then allow it to pull in any resources using the proper sorters around the actual design itself. That's actually good. I can fly back here. It'll do the same thing when it gets back to here when it's all finished. Another good design that's also come with this Automatons update is I also have an event controller on this that will tell it when it has a full container and when to go back, saving a lot of time. Really excited, really simple to do so, and I'm sure that will be the next video in this series. Getting onto something more complex and easier at the same time. Let me explain. Using my old design that does the exact same thing, I actually had to use a sensor range extender mod. As you can see, it goes to 1200. Let me just put that back. Instead of actually having the AI flight, the AI basic, which uses the similar thing as the remote block. It uses GPSs your player uses or places, like so in here. Scrolling down here, there's all the GPS, as well as the normal sorts of stuff that come with that remote block. Click it back to the follow player, or it can follow home, either a GPS or a beacon, etc, etc. But since this is going to follow me at 50 meters, also watch out when you're setting this value depending on how high your drone is following you at the same time. So this was very simple. It's just got those similar blocks to allow it to fly up. Very same thing as the old one, which I will also trigger up. And then it will still continue to follow me, but you'll notice the one on the left, the one that uses the AI block, its nose will always point towards me, where the one on the right does not, as you see. So I'll fly over here, and now the one on the right is the new one. You see its nose is still aiming towards me, so it's a much more accurate kind of tracking, if that makes sense. I'll leave those following me, and I'll get onto something a little more complex, as the turret controller from before the update, the player follow, etc, still doesn't quite work, and we can just skip onto something a lot more kind of complex. Summarize with all these sorts of unknown signal designs, and yes, the green, yellow, and red block are respective if they work or not. And this green is sometimes. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, for the fact that it doesn't quite precisely hit onto the unknown signal's GPS. Plus, it uses so many more blocks. It is insane. So all of these up here, that one there, the control seat probably doesn't need to stay there after placing those waypoints and GPSs, as well as having 2 extra batteries to then deal with the extra power needed. Not worth it in my opinion. It is much easier to stay with my complete vanilla drone, just using the remote block. It is much more simpler. You can actually get in control of it, just like so. It's just much better. As you can see, it's just the way it is. So, getting onto a drone that does not work other than using the remote block. So that actually does work, but let's trigger this up and I'll explain why. The button's over here. Button, who's got the button? There. Explain why it does not work. So it uses the same sort of GPSs as the minefield drones use to drop their payloads out in the world. So currently it's on the AI recorder block. Oh, yep, there goes them. Bye. It uses the AI recorder blocks to get away from the dock and to dock itself, and then swaps over using a timer to the AI basic to use these GPSs that should be just here. They're kind of hidden at the moment, so that's fine. You can see it in the last video. It will come down after turning that AI behavior off, like the remote block does, but when the AI behavior gets turned back on, it does not remember the next one in sequence. It will just continuously go back to that first GPS that we'll see just here. Instead of, I'll just exit out of that one and trigger up the next one so it can have some comparison. Now don't forget, this only uses one remote block instead of multiple different blocks, as I've said throughout this video, as that's a big pet peeve for me, as well as having to have a control seat on it just to place those waypoints. So as it turns the AI behavior off on that remote block, or the autopilot per se, it actually remembers the next one after it's been turned back on again. As you notice, it will then fly back up, go over to the actual grinder, and grind it on up and continue. With that being said, make sure you like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and stay sharp till next time. See ya.